You cannot doubt that God is in his house this morning. Sense his presence in a marvelous way. Thank you for the fervency of your praise, your worship to him this morning. You blessed me, and I'm sure you blessed the heart of our Lord this morning as you lifted up your voices to him and expressed your love and devotion for our great Savior. Aren't you glad you're born again this morning and that you're in God's house amongst the family of God? So good to be here this morning. I'm just excited about what God is doing in us and through us and for us. And if you aren't, well, get excited, because I believe God is doing good things this year and will continue to do great things for us here at House of Worship. Let's read the scriptures this morning as they're found in Joshua. Thanks, Stephen. I think it's Stephen's taken over down there. I can't see from here. It's either old age or lack of new glasses or whatever, but anyway. Now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land, and I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. Whoever followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So, on the day that Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I am just as vigorous to go out and battle now as I was then. Now give me the hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said." And let's jump again to Joshua chapter 17 for a few verses there. The people of Joseph said to Joshua, "Why have you given us only one allotment and one portion for an inheritance? We're other numerous people, and the Lord has blessed us abundantly." "If you are so numerous," Joshua answered, "and if the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, go up into the forest and clear the land yourselves. They're in the land of the Perizzites and the Raphites." People of Joseph replied, "The hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the plain have chariots fitted with iron, both those in Bath-shan and its settlements and those in the valley of Jezreel." But Joshua said to the tribes of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, "You are numerous and very powerful. You will have not only one allotment, but the forested hill country as well. Clear it, and its furthest limits will be yours. Through the Canaanites have chariots fitted with iron, and though they are strong, you can drive them out." And we know God will bless the reading of his word. We had a fantastic evening on Friday evening in God's house. I'm going to lower this down because it's booming a bit for me, so I can speak louder and you'll still hear me. Amen. Fantastic evening on Tuesday evening. And it prompted this little message and study this morning in my thoughts and in my mind. And I want to share with you this morning, thanks Jen, on the theme of a fearless future. A fearless future. You know, it's only 4 letters, a small, short word, but that word fear has stopped so many Christians dead on their tracks on their journey with God. Fear can manifest itself in many ways, but perhaps the most common way is having to deal with a problem or an issue that you've been accustomed to living with. Because when you remove that thing, essentially it means there's a different future for you that you're not familiar with. And according to many studies among those who claim to know, one of the things people fear most is the element of the unknown. In other words, what's coming next. Even if your future looks brighter and better, not knowing what it actually is going to be still remains many people to get stuck in a rut. And that applies to many people in their experience with God. Let me begin our study today by giving you 4 facts about fear that I think should help you handle that fear better. 4 brief little paragraphs. First of all, fear-motivated thoughts are all about, "I can't." They create a negative imagined scenario about what's going to happen next or what you can or cannot do. Here's the truth. You don't know what's going to happen next. Really, you don't. So how can those thoughts possibly be true? Stop worrying about I can't or what's happening tomorrow, because the truth is you don't really know what's going to happen beyond the next few seconds in reality. And what's going to happen after you walk out the doors of this church. You can plan it to the best of your ability, and rightly so, but we don't know. So why fear it? Number two, resisting fear strengthens it. The antidote is awareness. In other words, being willing to directly experience fear, but recognizing in a way that doesn't allow your thoughts and physical sensations to be overruled by what you know to be right or true. Thirdly, the goal is not to get rid of fear, as you don't have the power actually to make that truly happen, but you do have the power to change the way you relate to fear and how you handle it. And number four, fear sometimes is not always the enemy. Fear can actually be the voice of reason, the voice of caution, the voice of common sense that God has placed in your brain to tell you it's time to bail out and get out of that situation. Four little things I trust will help you this morning to cope with fear. Because if you and I are to become all that Jesus wants us to be, we must not let fear compromise our potential in Jesus Christ. So here's a couple of questions for us as we begin our study this morning. What fear has the enemy used you or I to keep from soaring to greater heights in God? What doubt has the enemy sowed in your heart and in your mind to keep you trapped where you are in life and in your relationship with God? What person in your life is the cause of apathy or lethargy that holds you back in your relationship with God? Or what problem are you afraid to deal with because it might mean a different future for you, and you'd rather be stuck in the mundane of where you are than face the future and the unknown? I'll tell you right here and now, for all of us who believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe the Bible teaches this, God has a future for you and I that is much bigger, better, brighter than anything you can attain to at the moment. God always wants to give us more and take us further on a journey with Him. In our two readings today, we see what happens when we face fear in the power and confidence of God. But in the other one, we see how fear stopped the people dead in their tracks because they weren't willing to face their fears with a confidence that comes through knowing God is with them. So let's go into our study a little deeper this morning. Let's note a few points I want you to take with you this morning. How do we have a fearless future? Well, here's the first one. Combat your fear with your faith. This is a very important but simple principle to know whenever we have to face our fears. Our faith helps us to see beyond the circumstances and should help us focus on the possibilities that God will create from the situation that we're in. Let's look at the scriptures and let them speak to us. We talked about Caleb in our reading. Caleb here is an 85-year-old man, and he's looking at this huge mountain that's in his way. Here's what he says. Caleb and Joshua, two of the best heroes of the faith as far as I'm concerned. Here's what Caleb says. Now look at me. God has kept me alive as He promised. It's now 45 years since God spoke this word to Moses in Israel, which wandered in the wilderness. But here I am today, 85 years old. I'm as strong as I was in the day that Moses sent me out. I'm as strong as ever in battle, whether coming or going. So give me this hill country that God promised me. I will drive them out just as God said. Read it in Joshua 14 that we read this morning. If only we could be like Caleb when it comes to dealing and facing our fears. But if we're not like Caleb when we're facing our fears, then we become a perfect candidate for never truly accomplishing on this side of eternity what God wants to do in us. God wants to do something in all of us, in us, through us, for His glory and for His kingdom and for our blessing. But we've got to have a Caleb attitude to let God do it. In other words, face our fears with the faith and confidence that God is in control and that God indeed is ruling and reigning in our lives and that God has a future for you and for me. Like Caleb, let's face our problems with our faith, with reality. Look, let me give you a couple of brief things here from Caleb's relationship with his God that stand out. Caleb's brilliant. First of all, to face your fears, don't ignore the obvious. Sometimes I feel that many folks think that facing their fears needs to pretend that we're not afraid. Everybody gets afraid at some point. Everybody. I don't want to state the obvious, but fear is an emotion and a sense that God gave to us. You walk up, you're down the street, and suddenly, for some odd reason or other, a lion appears in front of you. I know what I'd be doing. I'd be taking off. Because there's a natural inbuilt fear for our protection from something that's dangerous or something that we shouldn't mess with. So this sense of fear is a good thing if we use it in the right way, but we allow it so often to take over in ways that God never intended. You see, fear does something. It forces us to look at situations honestly. Look, let's go back to Caleb as an example. Caleb states the obvious about his situation and his circumstances. Listen to this. He says, and I'm rephrasing this in Belfast language, hey, listen, I was a young man whenever God gave these promises to me. He admits his weakness of old age and the fact that he's older. He says to Joshua, I'm 85 years old now, mate. I'm not physically the man I was. But then he's something else more important to say. He realizes the obvious. I'm not the young man I used to be. I'm losing my hair. I'm gaining too much weight. I'm not as agile as I used to be. The old ticker's a bit dodgy, whatever. But he says, now watch this. He says, but it's God who gave me this mountain. I might be older and more worn out, but with God's help, I can still take the mountain that he gave to me. He states the obvious, but he states it in a reflection of what God has done in his life and who's in control of his situation and circumstances. You can read this and think, well, that's crazy what God did in the life of Caleb. But it's not, because God can do the same thing in your life and in mine. I might be pushing 70 next year. I might be losing a bit of my hair. I might be gaining a wee bit too much weight around the middle. But I tell you something, I still feel strong in God. And I still believe God has good things for me. And I still believe God has good things for you and for his people. And you know what? I'm going for the mountain. Face our fear by stating the obvious, but stating it in a way that reflects our hope and our trust in God. Listen to what Philippians 1:6 says. Paul writes, being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. Look, anybody believe God started a work in them today? Well, then God can see it through if you're willing to go with him. You see, church, if God began a work in you, he's promised he will finish what he started. So just be faithful and take your mountain. Don't be afraid to state the obvious. State the problem, state the issue, state your weakness, state what you're facing. And you might say, somebody this morning, but Pastor Jen, I'm not really afraid of anything. Well then, now watch this. If you're not afraid of anything, why are you so afraid of surrendering everything in your life to God? Take that one home and think on it. Don't be afraid to state the obvious. Here's the second thing Caleb teaches me. To face your fears, have a strategy. Remember, Caleb here is 85 years of age. And no matter how you look at it, he's old. And yet he's trying to do something that a young man of 40 would even find difficult in some ways to take on. But I love what Caleb does after he takes out the 3 sons of Anak the giant. And you can read it in Joshua 15. Here's what Caleb says. He that smiteth Kith Jesper and taketh it, and I will give Ashkash my daughter to wife. And Othniel the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it, and he gave Ashkash his daughter to wife. So he says, anybody who defeats this great enemy, here's your prize, my beautiful daughter. Here's my beautiful daughter as your prize. Did you see what he does? He makes a strategy to overcome their fears. The young men might have been shaking in their knees when the thought of here's that beautiful girl for my wife. Boy, did that stop them shaking and quaking. They wanted to go and do whatever they needed to do to conquer their fear. He tells the mighty men, I'll give you the best looking girl in the kingdom to marry. She had to be beautiful because Othniel singly takes out an entire family by himself. She must have been some girl, I can tell you. He had a strategy. And that's exactly what we should be doing, developing a strategy to begin to deal with our fears. Put together a strategy. Now, your strategy is going to have to be different than mine, depending on what it is you're anxious or fearful about. Can I get personal for a minute? I have to freely admit, I guess one of the little things that niggles in me, and Susan and I have often talked about this too, It's sort of, sometimes the old enemy casts it up and you begin to worry about it. And fear is not maybe the exact word, but it's an appropriate word to use this morning. And it's the fear of your children and protecting them and keeping them safe and seeing them won for the kingdom of God and going on in the kingdom of God. But I developed a strategy, two things that have helped me deal with that. The first one is the strategy of committing my kids into the care of the Lord Jesus Christ, knowing He can protect them better than I can. I can do my best to help them and keep them safe and protect them and do good things for them. But you know what? Jesus Christ, my Lord, my Savior, can do a much better job of that than I ever can. So my first strategy is to commit them into His care and His keeping from our children, from our little ones. And you know what? That strategy has already begun to work, because my son and daughter, Marty and Lois, are sitting here this morning, clothed in their right mind, born again, serving God in the ministry and doing good things for the kingdom of God. The strategy works. But my other kids, Nathan and Sarah, are still not serving God. They live in a different world than me. Yet I want to be sure I influence them the best that I can in my faith and in my trust in God. I've already committed them to the Lord and asked the Lord to keep them safe and protect them and ultimately save them, if that's His will and plan and purpose. But the other part of the strategy is to help with that when they're home, which has been good recently, but when they're home and every chance I get to see them, I spend time with them to try and influence them with the things in the Spirit of God that they see in my life. A strategy. Having a strategy is not a lack of faith. It's a way of dealing with the fear. It's a way of dealing with the fear. So if you have issues, you can do the same thing. Work out a strategy that helps you deal with the fear. The first thing is commit it to Jesus. But then do something practically yourself that helps you deal with your situation and your circumstance. What you cannot do is give fear the chance to try and stop you from doing anything at all. Because if you don't do anything at all, then you'll get more fearful and start to wilt under the pressure. Here's the third lesson from Caleb. To face your fears, learn from the past. Learn, first of all, the past is exactly that. Past. Fear will do so often what it can to stop us from moving ahead by bringing up our past. What we did in the past. What somebody else did to us in the past. What we tend to do then is focus on that and stop moving forward in our faith to attack the mountain that God has given to us. Yes, learn from past errors. Don't repeat the mistakes. Facing fears doesn't mean that we run ahead without applying the principles that our past experiences have taught us. No, that's not what facing your fear and faith is saying. But we should use our past experiences to help us not make the same stupid mistakes again. We should look back and say, I don't have to do that again because God brought me to this point and I can go forward and leave all that behind me. The wisdom of remembering before what happened should teach us what to look for, not to do in the present, and help us go forward in the future plan and will and purpose of God. What wouldn't work before isn't going to work now, so don't mess with it. Do something different in God and move forward in His plan and His will and His purpose. Fear is actually a great tool if we use it the correct way, by looking at our past and saying it is exactly that, it's gone and it won't and can't and will not affect me anymore. Let me put some context on what I'm sharing here for a moment. Listen to what it says in Joshua 14:6. I repeat it again from the scriptures. I was 40 years old, Caleb says, when Moses, the servant of God, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought back an honest and accurate report. My companions who went with me discouraged the people, but I stuck to my guns totally with God. You see, what Caleb says to Joshua, he says, 40 years ago, we wanted to go into this land, but our friends allowed fear of what they saw whenever we spied out the land to melt the heart of those who are our peers. Joshua, we already have made this mistake once in allowing others to discourage us, so we're not going to make the same mistake again. If God says it's my mountain, I'm taking it no matter what anybody else says. He didn't repeat his past mistakes. And we shouldn't either. It's past, it's gone. Let's move forward from where we are now in God. All right, let me move on quickly. Here's the second theme about a fearless future. Not only can we use our faith to combat our fear. But secondly, we can turn our fear into fearlessness by the things that we do and the actions we take. Remember we read in chapter 17 about the sons of Joseph. Remember them? We read about it just a few moments ago. They had that valley they were afraid to go into. They were afraid of what they saw. It paralyzed them. Notice what Joshua says to them again. Joshua says to the sons of Joseph, he tells them the truth, first of all, about themselves. He reminds them in chapter 17, 15 through 18, he reminds them that fear has caused them to forget. He admits that the men in the valley are mighty, are brilliant, are powerful. They do have iron chariots and horses. But guess what? Joshua says, he said, don't forget you are also a mighty and a great people. And the folks in the valley are mighty men too. But they have something, or you have something that they don't have. They might have iron chariots and horses, but he says, you have the almighty power of God on your side. So go down and take the valley. What's the lessons we learn from this encounter this morning? Here's the first lesson from this little section. If you really want to face your fears, take biblical action. Take biblical action. There's a reason I specifically stressed biblical action. You see, God's word must be our GPS system for life. You know what GPS system is? It takes you somewhere. It guides you there. Remember we stated earlier that fear is a built-in warning system that God has put into our lives to help us deal with situations and circumstances. So don't ignore the feeling of fear, but pose the question to God about why you're in that situation and why you're feeling fearful because of those situations. And reach out to God and take note of the spiritual GPS that God's word tells you how to deal with the circumstances of life. I love what David says about these feelings of fear and what we face. Listen to what he says in Psalm 56:3. I think Brian quoted this the other night. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Now come on. I have a terrible sense of direction. Terrible sense of, I can go somewhere once, twice, 3 times and still get lost going back the 4th time. Susan's a brilliant sense of direction. She can go somewhere once and remember it 15 years later. So what do? I put my trust in the GPS. You stick Waze on or you get whatever it is that you're using and you put your trust in it and you follow it. Well, don't you? And yet so many of us have a difficult time following God's GPS. God says through the psalmist, what time I am afraid I will trust in thee. So we're able to open our electronics and follow it, but we open the Word of God and we look at it and it gives us our GPS plan and we go, oh, I'm not sure about that. Come on. Listen to Psalm 34. David reinforces in the Psalms what he's saying. I sought the Lord and he heard me and he delivered me from all my fears. What's the first starting point from a biblical perspective? Seek God first and see what he wants to say. David gives us some pretty clear instructions as to what we should do. Trust in God and seek God for help. In other words, go to God and say, show me, Lord, from your word, through the move of your spirit in my life, give me the direction I need to go in. Be my GPS. Here's the second lesson we learn to face your fears biblically. Practice praising God more. What's obvious to me as we read about the sons of Joseph is they were so focused on the giants, the chariots and the horses, and the wooded covered valley that they've completely forgotten that they have God who is their Savior and their deliverer and will give the enemies into their hands if they'll only trust God with all their hearts. You remember David over in the Psalms, how he faced the bear and the lion and that giant? How in the world did this man, who was small in stature, small and ruddy, the Bible calls him and says about him, turn into this huge, mighty man of God? Well, I think we find some of the secrets again in what David says through the Psalms. Listen to Psalm 63, verse 2. So, here I am in the place of worship, eyes open, drinking in your strength and glory. In your generous love, I am really living at last. My lips brim praises like fountains. I bless you every time I take a breath. My arms wave like banners to praise you, O Lord. Come on, let's face our fears by practicing praising God more and watch what God will do as a result. Did you catch that, what David said? David's courage was found in this praise in God's house with God's people, worshiping, praising, and exalting God. He found the strength he needed to face his mountain of fears every time he opened his mouth, raised his hands, and began to praise Almighty God, his deliverer. Next time you're facing the problem, the trial, the situation, start praising more. Start praising more. Turn on Sunshine Radio in your motor car and keep it on all day and watch what God will do. He'll begin to lift the burden, the fear, the anxiety. Get praising God. Third little lesson, to face your fears, then trust God for the results. You know, one of the reasons I think many of us as Christians become fear-filled and maybe even paralyzed sometimes in certain situations is because we're not always sure what the outcome of our obedience might actually bring. What if I die, Lord? What if I lose everything by facing this fear? What are a lot of people going to say about me if I do what you're asking me to do? Come on, look, just think about it for a minute. Put yourself in the place of Joseph's sons. What if taking that valley and fighting those mighty men who also had those mighty horses and chariots, what would it mean? They thought, and I'm sure many of them did, that it could mean death for them. Walking into a dire situation. Here's the deal, folks. Deaths really shouldn't matter to those who decide to face that fear in the faith of your hope of eternity that is to come. Do I want to die? Absolutely not. I've too much I still want to do. I want to see my grandkids grow up and get married and have a great life and do all sorts of stuff. I still have to go back to do a few things on the bucket list, walk down the beach in Santa Monica again and do a few other things that I need to do. I'm certainly not ready to go. But I tell you, and I'm honest as I look at you straight in the face this morning, I've no fear of death whatsoever because I know what my hope in eternity is. I just don't want to go yet because I think I've still a bit more energy. But I've no fear of it. So when God asks us to do something, why should we fear it? Even if we think it's the most impossible situation we've ever seen, because if God truly has given us the mountain, then let's go take it. You see, you ready for this? If we're willing to follow God, trust God, be obedient to God, and do what God truly asked us to do, it's God's responsibility to produce the results. Oh, a couple of you missed that. It's God's responsibility to produce the results. We just need to be obedient and walk in faith and let God produce the results. It's God's responsibility to take care of what we commit to Him. So why not commit everything and let Him take care of it? I've got to finish. I have 31 seconds left. No chance. Let me conclude. We mentioned David the psalmist. I want to finish by looking at it for a couple of minutes and reflecting on what David said in Psalm 23. You know the psalm so well, I don't need to quote it to you. But note what he's saying. Listen to these words and the expression that he's giving here. He's confident that he will have grace and love in his relationship with his Savior. He has faith that the God whom he trusts in will continue to lead him and guide him into the future. He speaks these words of faith that God will be faithful and unchanging, and that this good God will bless him with goodness and love. And not just for some days, David says, but he says those things that I've just mentioned will be for my entire life's journey with God. In other words, every day David expects he'll be pursued by the goodness and the grace of God. He expects it every day. Lamentations 3:23 carries the same theme. Listen to this wonderful verse. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. Now wait for it. They are new every morning, because great is your faithfulness. Generally, man faces the future with fear, but we don't have to. We can have a fearless future. Why do men face the future with fear? Because they have no security. Events will change, people change, the world changes. We've seen a lot of that only in recent months and weeks, that the world is fast changing. Banks will collapse. Insurance companies cannot insure you really the way you need to be insured. When we look at our future, it can be bleak if we don't have hope and faith that comes in Jesus Christ. But as believers, as Christians, as those born again into the kingdom of God, we can face the future not with fear, but with faith in a great and awesome God. Not because the circumstances will not change, but because God will not change. The reason why David was so able to say, surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, is because God was his security. God is the only security he'll ever need. And God has said he will never change and he will never leave us or forsake us. You know, Jesus, through all of his ministry, often repeated phrases like, do not be afraid. Why? Because no matter where you are in life, the shepherd says, whether you're lying down in green pastures, whether you're beside still waters, or whether you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, I will be with you every step of the way. Listen to Psalm 145:20. The Lord watches over all who love him. Do you need to say any more? I mean, seriously. The Lord watches over. Do you love him this morning? Then he's watching over you. That's not my words. That's the word of God himself. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. Frankly, what the future holds is not that important, but who holds the future is critical. We know whatever happens, God's will be fulfilled. And because his will is always good, God will care for our needs. We can always see and know God's goodness and mercy running after us. Always. Listen to that wee verse in Romans 8:28 again. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Goodness and mercy will run after us always if we're willing to walk with our God. We can live a fearless future. With Jesus Christ as our Savior and Lord, Psalm 23 becomes real. It brings reality to our lives. Why? Because if I know the shepherd, I don't have to fear anything. I don't need to fear poverty because the Lord is my shepherd and I have everything I'll need. I don't need to fear loneliness, for he'll never leave me or forsake me. I don't need to fear mistakes, for he'll pick me up, turn me around, and guide me on the right path. I don't need to fear failure, for he'll always restore my soul if I run to him. I don't need to fear the future, because goodness and mercy will follow me every day of my life. I don't need to chase them. They're chasing me all the time. And I don't even need to fear death, because I know I'm dwelling in the house of the Lord forever. We too can say, like the psalmist, God is always with us. Singers, musicians, you will come. Whether it's in the green pastures or beside the still waters, or whether it's in the valley in the shadow of death, or whether it's facing that impossible mountain, God is with us in the presence of our enemies. He goes before us, leading us in the right path. He stands behind us as a rear guard and a safeguard. And the promise is that his goodness and his mercy will pursue us every day that we're willing to go with him and serve him and be obedient to him and walk with him and do what he asks us to do. The promise from God's word this morning is we can live a fearless future. We can live a fearless future. So do it. Go from this place today with the confidence and the promise that you're walking with the Savior. And that if God has given you a promise and you're willing to accept it and be obedient to what he asked you to do, that promise will be fulfilled in your life and in your situation and in your circumstances. You know, the storm of life can blow on you hard, create so much fear and anxiety and doubt. But listen to what verse 2 of the next song we're going to sing says. Ignore that. Why? Because mercy roars like a hurricane wind. Furious love has laid waste to my sin. Come on, feel the breath and the breeze of his spirit this morning. Let the storms blow life as hard as they want. There's a hurricane wind of God's grace, mercy, love, protection, strength, sustenance blows on all of us this morning. Let's walk fearlessly into the future that God has for us. Come on, stand, church. Let's begin to worship.